Pivot tables for analytics and AI. We'll get started with the content in just a moment, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is George Mount. I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP. I'm an author of books with O'Reilly. I teach on LinkedIn Learning. I'm from sunny Cleveland, Ohio, and I teach data analytics. And I think to most of you, I'm the guy who teaches Excel for free. I do this a lot. I do a lot of these sessions week after week to get my name out there, to help the community, and hopefully you can pay me back with a review, get my name out there. If you're in a capacity to hire me, that's awesome too, because guess what? I can't teach Excel for free all week long. So we're going to go ahead and move into the content. And if you'd like to use the chat to communicate with me, you're welcome to do that. Your microphone and your cameras are disabled. Believe it or not, I've had Zoom bombers in the past, so I've had to turn that off, but you're more than welcome to use the chat. In fact, I would encourage you to use the chat. That way I know, hey, you're out there, you're getting into the content, you're enjoying it, and it's not confusing to you, okay? That really, really, really helps me out, because otherwise I'm just talking into the void. I may as well just do a video, right? I don't need a live audience. So any live participation helps me keep my sanity and helps me know that this is good content, okay? So for those of you who are watching the recording, you can also leave comments, and that helps me out too. And I'm going to share feedback, a link with you. I would love it if you filled out the feedback. I know a lot of people don't, but if you did, I would love it if you did, okay? So objectives for this session. We're going to be talking about tables. We're going to be talking about recommended charts. We're going to be talking about pivot tables. We're going to be talking about analyzed data and Power Query. So that's a lot for an hour. I hope and I think that we can do it. And you'll see that we're not really talking about Copilot today. We're not talking about AI. We're not talking about LLMs, because as it relates to Excel, there's a whole lot of other stuff that you've got to know before you dive into Copilot and Python and Power Automate. There's all this cool stuff to learn in Excel. But if you don't have this stuff down, you really can't progress into AI powered Excel. So that's really the goal. This is the bridge. This is what's going to get you at the place where Copilot and AI are going to begin to make sense to you. And I think that realistically, that's where most people are, most organizations are. They need their data in the right format. They need their data in tables. They need to use these basic tools to just take those first steps into AI with Excel. So that's really the goal for today. And if you do have any questions, let me know. Okay, so the rest of the content from here on out is basically just Excel. So what we're going to do is let me share the link with you for the ever coveted download files. Let me put those in the chat here. Okay, so if people come in late and I missed this link, they missed the link, I should say, go ahead and share that with them. I'll copper you in the chat with this quite a few times. So those of you who've been to these sessions before and we are recording, you'll know that all you should need to do is just click the button there, download that file. Okay, give yourself a minute to do that. The only thing I would ask of you is if you could just make sure that you extract that folder. Otherwise, you could run into some problems with some of the examples. So go ahead and just extract all right there, assuming you're on a PC, whatever it is on Mac, I couldn't tell you, but go ahead and do that. And once you've done that, those of you who have been here before, you know the drill. Yeah, I already see some thumbs up on there, so I guess I've trained you well. Okay, so I do see some people coming in still, I think, so I'm going to throw that link in the chat one more time. Okay. And okay, thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Pedro. Definitely helps me out to know that you're able to follow along. Like I said, that's kind of the point of why I do these live, is so that I know that things are making sense to people. So when I take this to clients, I know that it works. So if I don't get a lot of participation, that kind of defeats the purpose of these for me. So just help me out if you could. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make sure that you can download these files. All right. And you're going to go to the start workbook. Okay. We've got solutions. You can check out those solutions later on if you wish. So don't freak out if you miss a step. You can definitely ask in the chat. But if you're watching the recording or if you want to watch this later, you can also check the solutions as well. So we're going to go ahead and move into the starter workbook here. Okay. And we want to go back to the front. It looks like I have it to set up It's opening on analyze data. That's actually the last lesson. So we're going to go back to the top. I'm going to go to tables here. Okay, so this is our first data. We're using vehicle mileage data for this. Okay, and we are going to start with understanding tables because this is really the preferred method of data storage for a lot of modern Excel, including Copilot. You're going to get better results, and you'll need to know how tables work to understand Copilot's output often. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is insert this data as a table. Does anybody know how to do that? And you can let me know in the chat. And I know some of you have been at previous sessions and you know how to do this. So don't fail me. Tell me how to insert a table. You ask AI if you have to. And if you don't know, that's fine because that's why you're here. Yeah. How do you format this? Yeah. Insert as table. We're gonna do insert. I'll take it. Thank you, Pedro. Insert as table. Control T is gonna be your keyboard shortcut. Okay. So a couple ways to do that. Insert table. Okay. Right away we see something happen here. The data looks nice for one thing. Okay. You'll notice when we click in and out of here, and again, that was put any. I'll do that one more time. Put your mouse anywhere, click on it, Control and T. All right. My table has headers. It sure does. Excel's pretty smart. It's going to pick up, okay, yes, this is exactly where my data lives, A1 through H399. You can double check it if you want. In this case, it worked automatically. So let's go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice that it looks nice for one thing. That's the first one. If I click in and out of this, you're going to get a table design button here. Okay. Now this table design button has a lot of nice formatting wins here. So if you're spending too much time formatting your data, this is a nice place already. Irrespective of AI or anything fancy, just getting your data to look good in Excel takes a fair amount of effort. Okay. So that's already a win there. And if we go back to table design, you've got some options. Okay, you can format it in different ways. You can add some different features over here under table style options. Okay, if you want the filter button turned on and off, okay, that can be arranged. If you want to add a total row, this is a nice feature here. Let's go ahead and add that total right here. So by default, Excel is going to add a total to the last column. In this case, it's not all that useful. So I'm going to actually, it's kind of hard to see on my screen, but there's a drop down. Okay. Just hit the drop down and that will let you, I'll go to acceleration, and probably averages make most sense here, right? We want to know the average weight. We want to know the average mileage and so on and so forth. Okay. So that's adding a total. Okay. So that's pretty nice. And where things get really, really interesting is when we want to analyze this data and we want to update this data. Any questions about what we have done so far? Was everybody able to insert your data as a table? Please let me know. Awesome. Thank you, Ernesto. Appreciate it. Amazing. Okay, good. Okay. So what's great? Thank you, Larry. Love to see all the yeses in here. Thank you, Ken. Okay. Awesome. All right. So a few things that we can do with our data being in a table, the name of the game is instant updates and instant analysis. We want to do things fast. We don't want any errors. We don't want to have to redo our work. And that's really the name of the game with tables. So even something as simple as, maybe we want to take, let's take displacement, and we're going to like take the square root or something like that. Okay. So what we'll do here is let's take our square root function. All right. You'll notice that as soon as I insert that column, it gets added to the table. No questions asked. We can use that to our advantage because what will happen here is if we take the square root, what I'm going to do is just use my arrows. I'm going to hover over to displacement. You could also put square root, and I'm going to click on displacement here. We are referring to this at displacement. What is that? At is just a row reference. So it's displacement for this row. Okay. we're not using like C2 or D5, or, we're not using cell references. So we're not looking at the data where it happens to live in the Excel workbook. We're really using Excel as programmers now, and we're using the name of the table, the name of the columns. Naming is real important, and that's going to be real important when we get to AI. The better the names that we use, the better the results we're going to get from Copilot, and Copilot is going to give us the results usually in this kind of format. So get used to table references and formats. If you've not used them before, it's going to be really important. So again, we're not using square root of I or C2. We're using the square root of at displacement. At is a row reference. And when we hit enter, you'll see instantly that the data gets added, right? All the way down. So we don't have to worry about dragging formulas anymore. You don't have to worry about relative and absolute references anymore. This takes care of it, okay? So if you still haven't gotten the hang of when to use F4 and where to put your dollar sign, you don't need that anymore. Just use tables, use named references, and it's going to make your work much more dynamic. So the same thing happens here. If we were to add a new record, okay, that will update. Everything updates. We would probably want to put some data here, right? Also, I'll put some numbers over here, and you'll see that everything updates. Everything is instant, okay? And that's going to be a big win, whether you're feeding this into a pivot table, a chart, whatever you're trying to do. I'm sure we've all had that terrible experience of not including all of our data in our table, in our data source for a chart or report or whatever. Very unlikely to happen if you're storing your data as a table, but you do need to get used to these references. Okay, so that's how column references are going to work. So again, the at sign is just a row reference. It's displacement for this row. Okay, so that's that. Now let's look at doing some basic summaries. So let's say I wanted to say, I want to get a total, or let's say average miles per gallon. Now we do see, of course, under here, we do have a subtotal down here, but that's not the easiest, place to look for our data. Maybe we want to create a separate little summary on the side. So what we're going to do here is let's hit our average. Okay, we'll find average. We're going to find our miles per gallon column, which I think is over here. And you want to refer to this data. So you'll see that as you're starting to refer to the first three rows, we are seeing A2 through A6, and this is kind of the conventional way to work with your data. But if I hit the whole range, right, and I'm going to do Control Shift and down, that's going to be a quick way to do that. I'll put that in the chat there. Okay, so Control Shift and down. So again, the same idea. We're not referring to just where this data happens to be. We're referring to what it is, right? What is it named? And right now it's named Table 2 MPG. We're going to fix that in a second because Table 2 is a pretty terrible name. Okay, so let's go ahead and I will put that in the chat. And this is any kind of aggregation. So XLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, match, SUMIF, whatever, get in the habit of referring to the reference, because the nice thing again here is if I were to add data, right, this is going to update. Okay, so I could make a really big number and we will see that that average, well, it didn't go up that much, but suffice it to say, this is an automatic reference. All right, so that's aggregation in a nutshell. And the last thing I'm going to show you is naming, because these columns are named pretty well. Table 2, like we said, is not so good of a name. So where can we change that? A couple of options is if we go over to table design, again, a lot of formatting options here. There's also this box here that says table name. We can rename our table right here. It's called table 2 right now. I think it just kind of increments based on how many tables are in the data set. So we can just write over this and MPG that, or whatever you want to call it. I think MPG is good. So now this should instantly, you'll see that updates right automatically. So that reference. So we don't have to worry about anything breaking there, but we should get in the habit of naming things well. The other place to do that is under name manager. Okay. So you'll see right here, MPG. These are all the named ranges, all the named tables in the workbook. If I edit this, I can rename it there. I can also kind of double check the data source that it refers to right there. But that is working with tables in a nutshell. If you want more practice, you can check out my book, modern data analytics in Excel. The first chapter is all about tables, and I call them the portal to modern Excel. So kind of a different way of thinking about Excel. You're really using Excel more as like a programmer than we typically would otherwise. So any questions about tables before we move on to a couple more examples here? If not, you can just flash me like a quick thumbs up. That's fine too. But if you do have a question, I am all here for it. Yeah, so my book is Modern Data Analytics in Excel. Chapter 1 is on tables. Okay, so I put that in the chat. Okay, cool. Thank you, Alexa. All right, cool. Okay, so now we're going to move into recommended charts. We will come back to tables in a second here. In fact, we could convert this to a table right now. So if we go to recommended charts, again, the steps to do that, who remembers how to insert this data as a table? Just let me know down in the chat. Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Okay, cool. So yeah, insert table. Let's go ahead and do that. This is a smaller data set. This one, our data does not have headers, and Excel knows it. So that's good to confirm. My table has headers. So let's go ahead and call this something like region. I'm going to call this something like wait time. I don't actually know what these are, so I'm kind of guessing, but we're going to create a chart. And the act of doing this is going to prime us to think about how Excel kind of suggests outputs for us. So you've probably used this before. This is kind of my go-to to insert a chart in Excel. You can, if you want to, pick a specific chart type. But, often it's nice to get kind of a recommended set of options from Excel, and that's the big button up here. So just put your mouse anywhere. Let's go to recommended charts. Okay, so we're going to see a few things happening. Excel is going to suggest some bar charts. Those are some good options. It suggests a pie chart. This is maybe not the best option, but what I want to draw your attention to is that we see some line charts and scatter charts suggested here as well. So why is this happening? And this is actually going to be really important when it comes to using AI in Excel. So Excel is not sure, and I'm going to go ahead and insert a line chart. You can too if you want, but I'm going to delete it in a second. Excel doesn't know, is this a number or is it a category, right? Region 1, we're really using this as more just a straight up category. So, this could be like, the Cleveland region. This might be like the Buffalo region. And this could be Detroit, Pittsburgh. I'm going real Rust Belt here. Let's do Columbus. Okay, now it's really clear that we probably shouldn't use a line chart here because these are distinct categories. This is not a trend over time. But Excel's not really clear about that. And this is going to happen a lot because, unfortunately, for better or worse, Excel is so flexible with managing data. It's not like if you were to use Python or Power Query or SQL, usually you got to be very specific and say, okay, this is text. Even though it's 1, 2, 3, it's not really a number that we want to take an average of, right? So I'm not necessarily saying that you need to avoid using like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just want to be aware of what happens, right, when you use numbers. So if I were to go ahead and let's put insert recommended charts, now we'll get some new options here in Excel. One of them is actually going to be a filled map here. Now, if I click OK on this, I don't think we're going to get it because Excel doesn't work well, with just cities. It wants either states or it wants countries. And you're probably more likely to get that as a recommended chart when your title is labeled region. We want to be as specific as possible with the kind of data that we're getting here. Now, if I put like Ohio, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Let's see if this works. I'm not actually sure if it does. And I'm going to insert another chart here. Okay, so it still doesn't quite like that. I'm sure there would be a way to do this, but the recommended chart ain't it for some reason. Let's go to insert, and I think there's a map visual right here. If I insert a filled map right there, anyway, we'll move on, but just be very specific and know that sometimes Excel, and this is really this idea, if you've heard of this before, like a dimension versus a measure, right? The measures, I like to remember these are things that we do math on, like M for measure, M for math. So we take averages, we take sums, and this could be, sales, wait times, review scores, things like that. Okay, tenure, stuff like that. Okay. A dimension, these are really more of our categories. So we're thinking things like region, right, department. Now, where things get tricky with this is we could have something like a department number, which is a number, but it's not a number in so far as it's not a measure, right? It doesn't really make sense to take an average department number. They're really just arbitrary labels than some kind of a measurable quantity. And unfortunately, Excel really gets tripped up between a number category, right? A measure number and a dimension number. Okay. And I think just a simple example like this goes to show that. And I think we'll actually see this here in the next example, unrecommended pivot charts. Okay. Any questions about that before we continue here? And if you could actually go back to the tables worksheet, because we're going to use that as our data source for recommended pivot tables. Okay, thank you, Ken. Awesome. Okay, so that's recommended table of recommended charts, and it's a nice feature, but again, you're going to see this time and time again that distinction between like a dimension and a measure is really important with making sure we get reasonable outputs from AI and Excel. So I'm going to go back to tables here, and there's also a recommended pivot tables feature. Now, this is not as smart as Copilot. You can't ask it for a specific pivot table, but sometimes that's nice because maybe you don't really know what you're looking for. You just want some suggested outputs. So recommended pivot tables is kind of like a primordial version of Copilot for a very specific use case, right? It's not as general as Copilot. So we're going to go to insert. We're going to go to recommended pivot tables. Make sure that your mouse is clicked on this table. And let's go ahead and click on that. Okay. And we're going to get some insights suggested for us. All right. Now, I see some different options here. Okay. I like this one that says weight and miles per gallon by model year. Let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and insert this on an existing sheet. And if you want to insert it on a new sheet, that's fine. But I'm just going to put it, there's a worksheet I have dedicated to recommended pivot tables. So if you just go over to that tab and just click on, you should just be able to click on like the first cell, actually. I'll put that in the chat if you want it. But wherever you want to insert it, get our recommended pivot table. And we'll kind of critique this thing here in a second. Everybody able to do that? Just let me know if you want to see that again. Hopefully the pacing has been okay. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. I can get a little excited about Excel, so it's easy to go fast. So just tell me to slow down if it's necessary. Okay. All right, so thank you, Alexa. I saw a thumbs up there. Okay, so we have our pivot table, and again, this is a skill. We're not going to go in depth on this. I might do some training later, but there are a lot of places to learn pivot tables out there, but specifically in the context of recommended pivot tables, what are some of the things we want to be aware of here? First thing is that recommended pivot tables is not smart enough to like auto adjust. Once it gives you a pivot table, you're kind of on your own. So there's no prompt box here to say, well, I actually want this field or something. So you got to know how to work it. Even with Copilot, there's kind of limited, at least for the time being. Once you get an output, it's kind of hard to put the toothpaste back in the bottle, as it were. So we're going to go ahead and let's right click and put show field list. So we actually see the menu that will let us adjust this thing, right? So that's right click on the pivot table. You can show and hide your field list. Okay. So a couple things that we might want to do here. Right now, this says sum of miles per gallon. thinking about our aggregations, like we talked about, since most of this is we really want to compare like car by car, we're probably not as interested. This isn't like a sale or something that we want to see the total accumulation of. Probably makes sense more to compare in averages here. Okay, so with that being said, we would want to make that adjustment. Let's come down here to sum of miles per gallon. And if you click on value field settings, there's going to be an average button right there. Okay. So that's just changing. So that's kind of regardless of AI or not, just thinking what the best aggregation is going to be. Sometimes, especially in this system, there's not really a way to kind of reason with the tool. We'll have to make that heavy lifting on our own. The other thing, and I don't think any of these did this, fortunately, but this is definitely something that you might see. We've got a model year over here. So if I drag this into values, it is going to take a sum. And again, the model year, probably not something that we want to take a sum of. Maybe we could do an average, but just summing up all the model years. Excel tends to just anytime it sees a value, it wants to usually sum them. Okay, and that's including like an ID column. And you'll definitely see that with some examples. So we can go ahead and change this either to an average or just be aware, is this really more of a measure or a dimension? I think it's probably best served as like a dimension. So I'll go ahead and just place that back in the rows. Question, can we ask for more complicated pivot tables? Asking for very detailed and specific. Yeah, I would say for that, you would probably want to try to use Python with Copilot. You're gonna get better results trying to create more advanced pivot tables with Python. And I do have some training I've done on that, but again, this is really more of the basics. Copilot, if you have a question about can you do X or Y, the best answer is like try it and see what happens. Everybody's experience is different. But in my experience, pivot tables, Copilot likes to give you stuff back as pivot tables, but as far as getting like very specific, often asking for Python code to create that pivot table is going to work a little better. So not to scare anybody, you can still get a lot of benefits from pivot tables, but if you're looking for that extra layer, and we're on like 101 right now, we're talking like getting your master's using Python. So don't there's still a lot of stuff you can do with a bachelor's degree, right? So don't worry too much, but just be aware that that's kind of the progression. To get more serious about AI and Excel, you'll probably want to learn how to use Python in Excel as well. And I can help you with that, and I train on that, and I consult on that. So you're in good shape. Okay. Any questions about recommended pivot tables before we move on to the next step, which is analyze data? And this is kind of like the pre-Neanderthal co-pilot. Everybody doing good out there? Not scared away yet. Cool. Okay. All right. So we are on this data set. The last example here, analyze data. We're going to take a little bit more time on this one. All right. So we have some sales data, and we have it organized by department. We've got it broken down by channel and region. I want to get some insights from this data. So what can I do? First step is, first things first, let's insert a table, Control and T. My data has headers. Yes. Okay. So that's great. Second step is probably a good idea to actually name that table too. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. And again, you can do that under table options. I'm sorry, table design. Over here under table name, let's call this something like wholesale customers. Okay. And I don't think a dash actually works. I think you need to use an underscore. So I'll go ahead and give it that name. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And again, you can go to your name manager and just kind of get a high level overview. Looks like we've got a table somewhere in here that wasn't named. Oh, that's actually the table that we use for recommended charts. So if we wanted to name it, we could do it from here, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. And let's go to analyze data. Okay, so if you don't see Copilot, that's fine. Hopefully you do see analyze data. And like I said, this is kind of a primordial version of Copilot. It's going to help us analyze our data, as the name implies. It's going to give us suggested charts and pivot tables. So it's a little smarter than the two that we saw before. Okay, and you're going to still see the issues that we talked about with measures and dimensions kind of being mixed up. You might be seeing completely different output than me, as to be expected with generative AI. Okay. The last one that I see, or actually the second one, is doing the cardinal sin that we talked about. It's using region, assuming it to be, and I'm going to insert this one so we can see it more. It's assuming this region to be a category, right? I'm sorry, a quantity. 1, 2, and 3. Well, we know that not to be the case. There's no region 2.5. So we got a platform 3, 9 3/4 situation going on. I don't see it. Doesn't exist unless you're, a wizard, I guess. And we shouldn't plot our data like this, but Analyze Data did it anyway. All right, so just be aware of that, right? This distinction really matters. So some of these make more sense than others. And what's nice about this is that we can actually ask specific questions about our data. Now, it says ask a question. It really means it. We're not going to have any kind of like chain of thought prompting like you might with ChatGPT, where if you get something and you don't like it, you can ask it to change it. No, this is a lot more basic. So we could ask something like, what are total sales in milk, right? And we'll get that value. It's going to give it back either generally as a pivot table or a pivot chart. Tends to be, it suggests recommended, I'm sorry, kind of default preferred options there. So we do get that value. We can insert it into our worksheet. I'll come back to analyze data. How many rows of channel 2 are there? I think this should work. Yep, so count of rows, so it's able to do a basic row count. So that's really nice. So again, think you're in a meeting, it's kind of the end of the day, what have you. You just want a really quick insight from your data. This is a nice tool to have. By no means by no means as powerful as Copilot, but if you don't have Copilot, you probably still have analyzed data. So just a nice tool to know about. Now this is where things get interesting, because this is where we get into normalizing our data, tidying it, and to do that, you definitely should know Power Query. So the saying is a cliche, just like most cliches, they have a kernel of truth: garbage in, garbage out. And this isn't necessarily garbage, but it's just so messy that it may appear to be garbage. Okay, there's a fine line between a mess and garbage, and we're treading that line here. Okay, so let's go ahead and say something. What are total sales by region? If you've been to my other sessions before or read my book, you've seen this example. I use it a lot, but it's that important. So just bear with me if you've seen it. Let's go ahead and say, okay, sum of region. Now, Excel's kind of doing two cardinal sins here, right? It's taking region and it's summing it, and it's also not giving me what I want, right? I don't see total sales here. So what's the problem with this? This is a really classic example of data that maybe looks good for like presentation purposes, but as far as analysis purposes, those are two completely different distinctions. And people often kind of mix and match, especially in Excel, when you kind of have free reign to make the data look however you want. We can have data that looks really great in a presentation, but sucks for like analysis. And this is what's happening here. So Copilot, I'm sorry, not Copilot, but Analyze Data, Copilot would get confused too. Just doesn't know that these are all sales, right? As far as it's concerned, fresh milk and grocery are all completely different units of measurement. It doesn't want to sum them because it thinks these are apples and oranges, right? So we need to make it really clear that these are all sales, okay? They come from different departments, but they're still all sales. So the way that we need to do that, the easiest way is to just throw them all to single table. So we really want something that has our channel, that has our region, that has the department, yes, but also has the sales. So now it's really clear to us, to Excel, to Copilot, what have you, that this is just a sales column. Take a sum of it. So we're going to use Power Query to do that. Now, again, if you've not used Power Query, you can check out my book that I referenced. I got a lot of resources on that. Okay. So what we're going to do is our data is already inserted as a table. Perfect, because we do want our data as a table to use Power Query. In fact, that's really the first thing that we would need to do to get this into Power Query. Let's go to data, and we're going to go to get and transform data. Unfortunately, it doesn't just say Power Query. Okay. So you almost need to know like the secret handshake here. Get and transform data is what we want to look for. And let's go to data from get table/range. You'll see there are a lot of other places you get data from here. We're just going to get data right from this table. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. And we're going to do this in like, I think it's 3 clicks. Okay. it's not too bad. If you want to see it again, just let me know. So our goal here is to unpivot, unnest, reshape this data. We want fresh milk, grocery, frozen, detergents, deli, all as one column. Well, two columns, department and then sales. How are we going to do that? Channel's already selected. Keep channel selected. Hold on control. Click on region. Okay. And then you're going to right click. And then you're going to unpivot other columns. And I'm even going to take a screenshot of that just so you have it. Let me do that. Okay, so those of you who have done this before, go ahead and do it. If you want a little more help, maybe this screenshot will help you out. So again, control is really that magic keyboard shortcut for that one. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat there. Okay, you might need to kind of expand it. It's small in the chat, but you've got it. Right click on pivot other columns, and that's all it took. I remember having to actually use a pivot table and then do like a pivot table on top of a pivot table to do this back in the day. Okay, but then let's double click this and let's just give these better names because the importance again of names in using AI tools. Let's call this like department and then let's call this sales. All right, and now we want to bring this back into Excel. Okay, so what we're going to do there is let's go to close and load. You should just be able to hit close and load it. It'll load it into a table. My settings are a little different, so I'm going to actually go to the full close and load options because you have some options here. Let's make this a table. Okay, new worksheet is fine. We don't need it in the data model. If you want to know what that is, you can check out my other stuff. Let's click OK. All right. And now we have the table in exactly the format that we want. Okay, so we're going to go back to analyze data. And what's usually a good idea here is to actually like back out of analyze data and rerun it because we are using a new data set. Sometimes it gets a little confused about what data exactly to be analyzing, but we're going to get some insights here. We have sales broken down by department channel. That's a good sign. Okay, so now if we ask, what are total sales by region? Okay, we should get exactly what we want. It's given to us on a pivot chart. I'll take it. We've got the table right there if we want it. Okay, and that's what we wanted. Didn't get that if we didn't unnest the data. So Power Query is essential. If you're interested in AI, you need data in the right format. To get data in the right format, at least in Excel, Power Query is really the way to go to do that. So we talked about referencing data with tables, and you saw that Power Query uses tables. So that's kind of a starting point, right? This is really your driver's license, your table stakes to even get into the modern Excel game as tables. Okay, it's the portal to modern Excel. We looked at these references. And again, we're not saying like A2 to B17 anymore. We're not using dollar signs. Everything's being done with these structured references is what they're called. Okay. We looked at using some basic AI with recommended charts and recommended pivot tables. We're aware that there's a distinction between dimensions and measures, which Excel isn't always so clear about. Okay, we know that we're going to probably need to make adjustments and that just because we get a pivot table, it doesn't mean it's the right pivot table. Same thing with AI, but we know enough about pivot tables to make those tweaks. Okay, and then we also know enough about Power Query, and you can do all your data cleaning operations. So if you're spending, report after report, I need to, hide this column and filter these rows, and then I need to merge these two data sets together. And that's taking inordinate amounts of your time and causing delays and frustrations. Please look at Power Query. It'll save you a lot of headaches, okay? A lot of time and effort wasted with manual stuff that you could be doing. And that is really, these are the things that you need to know before you consider using Copilot. Okay, get comfortable with this stuff because otherwise you're not going to get a lot of value from Copilot. And that's really all I have for today. So we are a little early. We are recording this. If I could just send out a couple more pieces of information for you, I'm going to do that right now in the chat. So the first thing is feedback, which is really helpful for me. Again, I don't ask for any money for this, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find this much Excel content like for free week after week. So really the only thing I ask for you is any feedback and participation. That's kind of the currency of these events. Just getting feedback, getting participation is really all I want. So we are ending early. Maybe you'll have a little bit of time to fill that out. The other thing I would draw your attention to, and I'm putting these in the chat, and I will also put these in the email that will go out shortly with the recording. So we are recording, and I will send all this stuff out in an email. So don't feel like you missed it. But there are quite a few events coming up. Most, if not all of these are free. You can come to as many as you want to. You can invite your coworkers, whatever. Uh, yeah, share the word. That helps too. And would love to work with you. I do consulting. I'll share a link to my consulting services in the email as well. If you're not in a place to bring me in for consulting, then you can just come to these free events, share it. That's good currency as well. But that's really the only ask for these. I hope this was useful information for you, got you feeling more comfortable about using AI tools. What are the prerequisites? And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And if there are any final questions, you are welcome to ask those. Let's take a sec here, check the chat. Okay. See how everybody's doing here. Okay, while you're thinking of your kind of closing thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then that will all go out later today. Thanks so much. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Ashley.